All right, y'all. So I just wanted to touch on this here. I know a lot of people have been seeing this on IG, and I know they see me post this earlier this week, but I know I've been talking a lot about fighters that are on the chopping block that aren't improving, but let's be positive, all right? Because there are a lot of fighters that are realizing their weaknesses and really trying to sharpen up their tools. There's a lot of fighters that are humbling themselves, saying that, hey, I got to link up with some of the best fighters out there and get some work in. And shout out to Tatiana Suarez. I mean, she's one of them. I've also seen Yan Xiaonan do the same thing, kind of link up with none other than the bullet Valentina Shevchenko, and who's the better fighter to link up with that has a little bit of everything that you need, right? Like Valentina Shevchenko is pretty much one of the most complete fighters we got in WMMA today, and we all know she's one of the best counter strikers, and that's what she's really known for, but she can switch it up on you real quick, right? She can make adjustments in a fight. She can adapt. So, yeah, Valentina Shevchenko to me, she's like the complete fighter that if you are not the best wrestler you can reach out to, or if you're not the best striker you can reach out to. Hence, Yan Xiaonan and Tatiana Suarez, right? So, yeah, I've been seeing this lately. You see here Tatiana Suarez, getting that work in with Valentina. And it's probably also some mutual scouting ahead for both fighters here, because the bullet, I know she's not looking ahead of Manon Fior, but she's probably trying to get a little intel on Zhang Wei Li, right? Which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But yeah, man, it's just good to see Tatiana Suarez, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more later. I'm just doing this one here because I got a little time. But yeah, Tatiana Suarez, seeing her, in the lab with fighters like Jocelyn Edwards and, even Valentina Shevchenko, and you see Ivana Petrovic here, just working with a bunch of different fighters that want to get better. That's how you grow, that's how you really grow. You got to go in there with different fighters from different backgrounds that all have the same mission, different backgrounds, different paths, but same mission. They all got the same mission. And, Tatiana Suarez, this is the only way she's going to get better is to, step out of her comfort zone, step out of familiar ground and, start working with some of the better fighters that can really light you up. You want to get lit up in sparring and you want to get lit up in camp. Better there than in an actual fight, right? So it's good to see, I didn't really see like a lot of work here, but I'm sure Tatiana is trying to get some of that striking work in, because that's the number one thing that she really needs to put together now. That's one thing that she really needs to get the basics down if she continues to fight on. 115 is a striker-oriented division. I always say that, but there's a lot of fighters that are growing, but still there's a lot of fighters in there with good stand-up that can now expose Tatiana. Tatiana's been exposed like that. I mean, we all knew she was more of a wrestler, but still, like, even some of the lesser fighters now, if they just figure, a couple of things out, they'll be able to use their footwork on her, right, and stun on her. So I think it's really good that, Tatiana is making this change now, because if not, like some of the other fighters I talked about, what happens? They just get caught up in their comfort zone and they just keep fighting on, and they think this time will be different. This time will be different. Oh, no, my wrestling will work this time. My power will work. No, it won't. It won't if the last person that exposed you figured you out enough so the next person can say, okay, there's a blueprint. So I just think that, for Tatiana to get better as a fighter, this is one of the keys that she needs to do, really work on her footwork, work with somebody that can, kind of loosen her up here and work on her range and be comfortable just letting shots go. Be comfortable letting shots go and incorporate those shots into a position where, she can fake with right hands, fake with right hands from the southpaw stance. Like, that's where she stands, fake with some of those right hands and right hooks to where she can get comfortable to a point and, feint into a takedown, switch it up on them so her opponents don't know that, okay, this time she's trying to strike with me. I got to be careful. But then, boom, she takes you down, right? You don't want to be predictable moving forward, because like we said, her style is a style where, a lot of girls now, they can just keep her at bay with the jab, or, they can just work on their takedown defense and, they can expose that. So when you look at fighters like, Tatiana reaching out like this and, getting that work in, we're coming off of that, bad loss. And now you see her in there, one of the best fighters in the world. It lets you know that her mindset is okay. Like, she knows what she needs to do. She's not lost. She's not going back to the same camp or same drawing board, thinking that, oh, this time will be different. No, like, I got to make it different. I got to be uncomfortable this time and do my work, right? So hopefully, this ain't just like a little tour where, she's just getting in a couple of sessions. Hopefully, this is a thing that's going to be more frequent for Tatiana. She's working with some stand-up fighters here that can help make her comfortable as far as, controlling her distance and kind of grow from there, because we've seen it so many times before. So many other fighters think they're the best striker, they don't need wrestling, or they're the best wrestler, they don't need striking. So they just get caught, beat up, and it never changes, So fighters like her, I've seen, Manon Fior and Teresa Blader working. Teresa Blader, she's another one that's mostly a grappler. She needs to improve her striking. She's working with Manon and working with other fighters that come from the Muay Thai background now. Josephine Newson's in that camp. So, yeah, you see a lot of other fighters understanding that, okay, I have to mix it up. I have to work with other fighters that are better than me in these avenues. It can't always just be me trying to figure it out myself. And that's another way you grow. You got to link with better fighters. You got to link with better fighters that know. You got to link with fighters that know more than you. You don't know everything in the fight game. And I think that's what makes a lot of other fighters get caught up in their game, thinking that I can always depend on me. No, you can't, because you can't depend on you all the time, because your style and your attitude is what's already holding you back. That's just how I see it. But yeah, like I said, seeing, Tatiana and Valentina up in here working makes me wonder, what kind of plans they got here. Guess they're both getting intel. Maybe Tatiana is providing, the big, strong flyweight strength that Valentina needs to go up against a Manon Fior, or, Valentina might be getting a little intel on Zhang Weili. Like I said, not jumping ahead, but maybe she's just trying to find out how fast is she? How hard does she hit? How strong is she? So a lot of different things. I'm sure Suarez probably feeling Valentina in on Zhang Weili. Maybe, they talked about it a little bit. And I'm sure that if Valentina's seen the fight, she's probably helping Tatiana where she had some hiccups, letting her know what she's doing wrong and kind of working on her stance and how to incorporate her stance into more of a wrestler striker, where she can get some work in on the feet, So, yeah, man, that's all I got on this one, guys. I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because, like I said, I'm always seeing these other fighters. I've been telling y'all it's a pattern with these girls getting cut. But, hey, man, there are some other fighters out here that you see working that want to get better. And somebody like Tatiana of her caliber, she would reach out to somebody and be humble. People always keep saying, oh, she needed to be humble. Man, get out of here with that crap. Like, Tatiana knows what she needs to do. She knows and understands that, because somebody that wants to be the best understands that she has to be humble and get with some better fighters than her, right? But that's all I got, guys. Let me know what y'all think. Combo Breaker 99. I'm out. Subscribe. Peace.